Winter, 1945. The world was collapsing into its final months of war. Snow covered Poland like a cold, white grave, and in the middle of that brutal winter, something impossible happened. A military train carrying nearly 400 German soldiers vanished without a trace. No wreckage, no survivors, no radio calls for help, just silence. Eyewitnesses later said they watched it roll toward the Eagle Mountains and never came out. For decades, historians, treasure hunters, and governments searched in vain. Some say it was carrying gold, priceless art, and top-secret German weapons. Others whisper a darker truth, that the men aboard were buried alive, sacrificed to hide the Reich's most dangerous secrets. And now, nearly 80 years later, the ghost train has been found. But what lies inside could change history forever. Before continuing, if you are comfortable, where are you watching from and what says your time? Let's go on. According to German military logs, the train was known as Transport 472. It had been assembled in absolute secrecy. No announcements, no paperwork on open files, all under the cover of darkness. People who were there that night still remembered the platform. A bitter wind cut through the station. Steam hissed from the iron wheels. Soldiers stood in thick gray overcoats, rifles slung over their shoulders. Some of these men were veterans of the Eastern Front. They were exhausted, worn down, haunted by things they would never talk about. Others were barely old enough to shave, boys, really, trying to hide their fear with stiff posture and blank faces. Their orders were simple: reinforce the German defensive lines near Silesia. Silesia was the last barrier against the Soviet advance. If it fell, the road to Berlin opened. But whispers soon spread through the ranks. Quiet whispers, terrified whispers. Because rumors said the train carried more than soldiers and bullets. Some said the last cars were sealed steel vaults, guarded by SS officers who spoke to no one, who watched every move, who kept their hands on their pistols. Others believed the vaults were filled with stolen treasures, priceless art looted from Polish museums, gold, relics, things taken in the chaos of war. And the most frightening rumor of all, that the train was transporting experimental weapon components for secret underground research sites. Weapons the Reich hoped would change the outcome of the war. No one knew for sure. No one was allowed near the last cars. The soldiers were told only one thing: this mission is critical to the survival of the Reich. And then, the train rolled into the mountains. Most people will scroll away and forget this ever happened. But not you. You have stayed. So please subscribe, because some mind-blowing stories are coming your way. At 4:12 a.m., January 17th, the conductor of Transport 472 sent a final message. Entering Tunnel D-13. All systems are normal, seconds of static. Then silence. But the silence wasn't normal. Minutes later, the radio line died completely. Dispatch tried again. Nothing. Scouts were sent to investigate. They found no crash, no broken tracks, no smoke, not even a single bolt. It looked like the train had never existed, but something didn't add up. Villagers from Willem, barely 2 kilometers away, reported hearing engines roaring underground for hours after the disappearance. Not above, not inside the tunnel. Below it, engines that shouldn't have been there. Someone or something had taken Transport 472. But investigators would soon realize the real mystery wasn't how, it was why, because the cargo on that train mattered more than the soldiers on it. By January 1945, the German Empire was falling apart. Soviet artillery was less than 100 kilometers from Berlin. German cities were crumbling. Refugees filled every road. Desperation filled the air. But even as their empire collapsed, Nazi high command stayed fixated on one thing: secrecy, not victory, not retreat, secrecy. Entire divisions, thousands of men, were reassigned not to fight, but to guard convoys heading west, convoys filled with documents, prototypes, blueprints, artifacts stolen from museums and private collections, everything the Reich could not afford to let the Soviets capture. Transport 472 was one of those convoys. But unlike the others, its final cars were sealed shut, locked from the outside, guarded by silent SS officers who never answered questions. Whatever was inside those steel vaults, the soldiers were never meant to see it. Officially, Transport 472 was headed for Silesia, now Poland, a fortress city, a place Hitler ordered to be defended to the last man. The soldiers aboard were meant to strengthen its collapsing defenses. At least that's what the paperwork claimed. But the manifest told a different story. The first 3 cars were normal: ammunition, rations, standard supplies, but the 4th, 5th, and 6th cars marked Reichsführertreuung, imperial business, confidential. After those labels, the records go completely silent, almost like someone erased the truth from history. Even now, historians argue over what those cars carried. Some say parts of the V-2 rocket program, technology, so advanced it could change the course of future wars. Others swear the sealed vaults were filled with looted art and stolen gold, ripped from Eastern Europe in the Reich's final hours. But the most disturbing theory comes from recently declassified Soviet intelligence. Their files mention whispers of a weapon, a prototype so experimental that only a handful of people even knew it existed. And it was being moved by rail to an underground facility beneath the Eagle Mountains. If that's true, then this wasn't a transport mission. It was a last-ditch rescue operation. Transport 472 wasn't a supply train. It was the Reich's final, frantic attempt to save itself from complete destruction. But the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. Why were SS scientists riding inside what was supposed to be a routine troop convoy? Why did the train take a secondary route through the Sowe Massif, a path tied directly to Project Riese, the Nazis' massive underground complex? And why did multiple witnesses, even under the threat of execution, insist the train didn't head west toward Silesia, but downward, into the mountains themselves, downward into tunnels that officially didn't exist? Whatever Transport 472 carried, one thing is clear: its disappearance was not an accident. It was intentional, calculated, planned. And that plan stayed buried, under rock, under lies, under silence, for almost 80 years. Someone wanted this train gone. The final transmission from Transport 472 came at 4:12 a.m., January 17, 1945. A simple message: routine, boring. Convoy intact, entering Sector D-13. All systems nominal. Nothing unusual, nothing urgent. The kind of report sent dozens of times before. Forgettable, if it hadn't been the last trace the world would ever hear. Because minutes later, everything changed. The line went dead. No mayday, no enemy contact, no request for help, just silence. At first, no one panicked. Communication failures were common that late in the war. Bombing raids destroyed cables. Snowstorms blocked signals. Entire regions went dark for hours. But when the sun rose, and still there was nothing. Command grew nervous. Patrols were dispatched to the western entrance of the tunnel, the last place the train was seen. What they found was unnerving. No wreckage, no scattered supplies, no broken rails, no explosion marks. The tunnel was untouched. The tracks were perfect. It was as if the train had simply never passed through. A disappearance with no physical trace is impossible, unless it never left the tunnel at all. Soviet scouts moving in from the east reported something odd, too. They heard vibrations beneath the Eagle Mountains, deep, slow, rhythmic, like heavy machinery moving underground. At the time, they assumed it was a mine, or a bunker, or some hidden facility they hadn't mapped yet. But no official record ever confirmed such a site existed. Not then. Not after the war. Not even today. So what exactly was moving beneath those mountains that night? Theories spread fast, too fast. Every soldier, every villager, every official had their own explanation. Some said partisans had sabotaged the tracks, that they detonated charges, buried the wreckage, and vanished before sunrise. Others insisted the Allies bombed the train in a secret strike to steal whatever it was carrying. A few whispered that the soldiers aboard had defected, redirecting the convoy into the mountains to surrender its cargo before the Soviets arrived. But the most unsettling theory was the one people couldn't dismiss. The train didn't crash. It didn't explode. It was diverted, on purpose, diverted underground, into a tunnel network so massive, so hidden, so classified, that even Nazi archives barely acknowledged it existed. And if that was true, then one question became terrifying. What was so valuable on that train, that hundreds of men and tons of cargo were erased from history to protect it? Something worth sacrificing an entire convoy. Whatever the answer was, it stayed buried, literally, deep beneath the stone and ice of the Eagle Mountains. They say the soldiers aboard Transport 472 vanished because they ignored the signs, the sudden silence, the ominous tunnel, the instinct that something was terribly wrong. Most people would have done the same, until it was too late. Don't let history repeat itself. Learn how to notice danger, stay alert, and survive, wherever you are. Get your survival guide, How to Stay Safe in Hidden Places 2025, in the pinned comment below. The war ended months later, but the mystery of Transport 472 didn't. It refused to die. As Europe rebuilt, Allied intelligence focused on unfinished business, high-ranking Nazis on the run, hidden research sites, missing convoys. Transport 472 was at the top of the list. A ghost train with no wreckage, no survivors, no explanation. In 1946, the Americans, British, and Soviets formed a joint task force. They combed through Lower Silesia. They reviewed seized German documents. They interrogated surviving railway workers. They even used early ground-penetrating radar on abandoned tunnels. Nothing. No metal, no fuel traces, no human remains. The tunnels were empty. The tracks were clean. It was as if the train had simply driven into thin air. But trains don't vanish. Something had to take it. Yet the locals insisted the truth was different. Very different. Farmers spoke of strange lights flickering in the forests at night, as if lanterns were moving beneath the soil. Not above it, not around it, under it. Lights where there should be nothing. Shepherds claimed they could still hear distant rumbling under their feet. Not in 1946, not in 1950, but decades after the war ended. They swore the train was still running, endlessly, looping through a hidden maze of rails deep inside the Eagle Mountains. Most would have dismissed these stories as legends. If not for one detail no one could explain, some of the region's oldest mine entrances were suddenly sealed shut by Soviet forces, guarded, restricted, and marked off limits without any official reason. Soviets don't guard empty holes in the ground. As governments moved on, private explorers took over. The mystery became an obsession. By the 1960s, treasure hunters were digging through collapsed shafts. Some believe Transport 472 carried the fabled Amber Room, once stolen from Tsarskoye Selo before disappearing forever. Others were sure the vaults held priceless art looted from across Europe. A few claimed the cargo was even more dangerous: nuclear research, prototypes, abandoned weapons programs. Every few years, a rumor would spark hope: a sealed shaft, a missing map, an old witness coming forward. Expeditions would rush to the Eagle Mountains, and every time, they returned empty-handed. But the deeper investigators dug, the stranger the truth became. Some sections of track disappeared straight into the ground. No explanation, no record. Entire tunnel systems appeared in German blueprints. But not in any modern survey. It was as if the mountain itself had swallowed whole structures, or someone removed them on purpose. And the same question lingered over everything. If the train truly vanished beneath these mountains, who built the tunnels to hide it, and what else is buried down there? With every passing decade, Transport 472's story only grew darker. What started as a wartime mystery became something far more enduring, a legend forged in stone, wrapped in secrecy, and whispered across generations, a ghost story written in steel and silence. And the truth is still waiting underground. To understand what might have happened to Transport 472, you have to go deeper, not just into history, literally beneath the earth, because the truth is buried far below. Beneath the dark, pine-covered ridges of southwestern Poland lies one of Nazi Germany's most ambitious secrets. Project Reese, or Project Giant. Carved into the heart of the Eagle Mountains during the final desperate years of the war, Reese was a labyrinth. Tunnels, bunkers, chambers so vast that even today, much of it remains unexplored, and some of it might never be explored. It was built in near-total secrecy between 1943 and 1945. Tens of thousands of forced laborers from concentration camps were pressed into service. Many never survived. Conditions were brutal: starvation rations, freezing temperatures, relentless shifts underground. Survivors described caverns the size of cathedrals, concrete tunnels stretching for miles, rail tracks leading into utter darkness, destinations unknown. And some of those tracks may have swallowed Transport 472. What the Nazis planned for Reese remains one of the war's great unanswered questions. Official records were destroyed as the Reich collapsed. Surviving documents are fragmentary. Some historians say it was meant as command bunkers, a final stronghold where Hitler and his inner circle could direct a guerrilla war from underground. Others argue it was for advanced weapons research, jet propulsion, chemical agents, even components of an early nuclear program. But a third theory, the one that chills experts the most: Reese wasn't just a bunker. It was a secret transport hub, a subterranean railway system, designed to move men, weapons, secrets, all without detection. And that might explain why Transport 472 disappeared into the heart of the Eagle Mountains, a train vanishing into a network built for no one else to find it. That theory fits Transport 472 eerily well, because the evidence lines up in ways too strange to ignore. Several sealed entrances discovered after the war showed signs of heavy rail use. In one abandoned tunnel, Allied engineers found rusted tracks leading straight into a collapsed chamber, a chamber large enough to hold an entire convoy, as if someone planned for the train to vanish forever. Locals remembered strange events in the spring of 1945, deep, muffled explosions echoing beneath the mountains, possibly demolitions meant to seal the tunnels as the Soviets advanced. And if the train had been sent there, that would explain why it was never seen again. If Transport 472 was diverted into Reese and entombed behind concrete and rock, it wasn't lost. It was hidden, locked away. A secret the dying Reich refused to let anyone uncover. Its cargo and the train itself vanished from the world above. As the decades passed, the war faded. But the mystery of Transport 472 didn't. For the men of the 3rd Infantry Division who waited in vain for reinforcements, it became a lifelong burden. Letters, memoirs, stories shared at reunion halls. Phantom trains haunted their memories. Some swore they could still hear it in their dreams. Some blamed chaos, miscommunication, bad timing. Others were convinced the disappearance was deliberate, something they were never allowed to know. Families of the missing soldiers clung to hope. Mothers and fathers wrote to Allied governments begging for answers. Wives remarried but kept photographs of husbands who vanished into the mountains. Children grew up with stories of fathers who might still be alive somewhere. Prisoners, defectors, survivors living under assumed names. Yet no one ever found a trace. Decades passed. Only silence remained. By the 1970s, interest in Transport 472 had waned. Official investigations quietly ended. Files labeled Transport 472 collected dust, forgotten, neglected archives. New conflicts erupted across the globe. The missing train became a story people whispered about, not a case anyone pursued. Locals started calling it the ghost train of Lower Silesia. Treasure seekers still combed the forests, metal detectors in hand, shovels and pickaxes ready. Yet even they began to question whether anything remained. Over the years, the land reclaimed its scars. Collapsed tunnels were hidden. Entrances were buried under soil and rock. It was as if the mountain itself wanted the past forgotten. By the 1980s, most historians dismissed the story entirely. To them, it was a legend born from wartime fear and fading memories. Some claimed the train had been destroyed in a secret Soviet airstrike. Others thought it might have derailed into a hidden ravine. But a few skeptics refused to let the theory rest. Trains don't simply disappear, one historian said. Something happened in those mountains. Something hidden deliberately. And so the mystery persisted, whispered through generations. Tales of the ghost train survived in small towns. Journalists occasionally wrote about it in obscure publications. Families passed down stories, keeping hope alive. The truth, if it still existed, lay buried beneath the trees, behind rock and earth, in places where no one dared venture. But legends have a way of resurfacing. And in the case of Transport 472, it was about to. Nearly 8 decades later, the mountain would speak again. In the spring of 2023, a team of archaeologists from the University of Poland was performing a standard geological survey near Lower Silesia town. They were mapping old tunnels and subsurface anomalies left from the war. Most days were dull, collapsed shafts, forgotten storage rooms, sealed mine entrances. But one April morning, their instruments detected something unusual, something that didn't belong. A signal from the past, hiding underground for decades. Deep under a forested slope about 70 feet below the ground, something appeared on the radar. Ground-penetrating scans showed a long, solid shape unlike anything the team had encountered before. Too precise to be natural, too massive to be just rubble. It wasn't a bunker. It wasn't a natural formation. Even stranger, the scan revealed evenly spaced voids, parallel lines, almost like the gaps between train axles. At first, the archaeologists assumed it was scrap metal buried decades earlier. The region was full of leftover wartime debris, rusted machinery, collapsed tunnels, remnants of old German projects. But repeated scans told a different story. The object stretched nearly 170 meters, the approximate length of a fully loaded military transport train. Density readings confirmed it wasn't random metal. It was engineered, purposeful, constructed with intent. Could this be Transport 472? The discovery shook the archaeological world. Could this be the phantom train explorers had sought for generations? Could the ghost of Lower Silesia finally have been found? The Polish government acted quickly. The site was sealed. A joint task force of historians, engineers, and military officials was assigned to oversee the excavation. Rumors spread almost immediately. Sealed compartments, Nazi insignias, even potential evidence of war crimes hidden underground. Within days, international media swarmed Lower Silesia town, camping outside the security perimeter, desperate for any glimpse of history about to resurface. But what lay beyond the sealed entrance was far more shocking. Further scans revealed something chilling. This wasn't just a train-shaped metal mass. At one end of the buried chamber was a reinforced barrier of concrete and steel. It had been deliberately sealed. Someone, long ago, had ensured that whatever was inside would never be discovered. And for decades, they almost succeeded. Until now. By summer, excavation had begun. The work was slow, painstaking, the kind of effort usually reserved for ancient tombs, not a train buried beneath a hillside. Engineers sank vertical shafts, carefully removing layer after layer of earth. Each shovel brought them closer to a mystery that had haunted historians for decades. Every scoop of soil revealed a secret buried for nearly 80 years. As they dug deeper, fragments of rusted steel began to appear, riveted plates, twisted rebar, corroded bolts once part of a massive tunnel system. Then, in late August, they struck something unmistakable. A curved edge of iron, still showing traces of Feldgrau paint, faint outlines of a swastika. The discovery hit the headlines worldwide. What began as a routine archaeological dig had transformed into a confirmed find. A World War II-era train almost perfectly preserved under the earth. Transport 472 had finally been found. As excavation progressed, more details emerged. Massive steel wheels embedded in hardened clay, coupling hooks linking the cars together. On one plate, almost illegible beneath corrosion, the German military officer's eagle emblem. This was no ordinary transport. It had carried something far more important than soldiers or supplies. But what stunned investigators most was the train's position. The front of the convoy did not rest in a collapsed tunnel. It was hidden behind a wall of reinforced concrete poured deliberately. Blast marks inside the chamber suggested the wall wasn't an accident. It had been built as a barrier, a permanent seal. By early September, the first car was fully exposed. Inside, time had frozen. Rusted rifles still propped against seats. Ration tins stacked neatly in rows. A faded map of Eastern Europe pinned to a wooden wall. Helmets, journals, dog tags, personal effects scattered across the floor. Silent witnesses to the hundreds of men who had boarded the train and never returned, their lives preserved in the soil, waiting for the world to see. The media hailed it as the greatest World War II discovery of the century. But amid the headlines and excitement, a darker question loomed. Why had the train been deliberately sealed? And what still lay hidden inside the cars that remained untouched? The secrets inside could rewrite history. When archaeologists finally forced open the first sealed car, the air that escaped was thick, dust, decay, and something heavier, the unmistakable weight of history, and it pressed down on everyone who breathed it in. What they saw stopped even the most experienced investigators. Skeletal remains of German soldiers still in their seats, some slumped forward, helmets clinging to their skulls, rifles balanced upright between their knees, as if they were waiting for orders that would never come. Others had collapsed where they fell. Bony fingers still gripping leather canteens or ammunition belts. The uniformity of their positions suggested discipline to the very end, or perhaps that they had no idea what awaited them, men frozen in their final moments, untouched for decades. Personal effects lay scattered across the car, silent echoes of lives erased. Dog tags, numbers still visible beneath rust. Handwritten letters, folded neatly, never sent, dated January 15th. Rations wrapped in wax paper, untouched. One soldier's journal offered a glimpse of their fear. Short, tense entries described the journey. The last was dated the day before the train vanished. We are to proceed without delay. Orders classified. Rumors of Russian advance are worse than expected. And then, silence. After that, history itself seemed to disappear. The forward cargo car revealed the most startling discoveries. Stamped across the steel crates in bold black letters was a chilling phrase, Geheime Reichssache, top secret imperial business, a warning that what lay inside was never meant to be seen. Inside were prototype weapons components, jet turbines, high-voltage coils, schematics unlike anything recovered by the Allies after the war. Other crates contained looted treasures, gold bullion marked with German central bank seals, silver chalices taken from Eastern European churches, oil paintings thought lost forever during the German plunder of Polish capital and St. Petersburg, even rare books and religious artifacts, likely intended for the SS's planned Hitler's art vault, a trove of war and conquest, hidden for decades underground. The emerging picture was staggering. This was no ordinary transport. It was a rolling vault of the Third Reich's last ambitions, carrying both the tools of war and the spoils of conquest. Yet none of it had ever reached its intended destination. It had been buried, sealed, left to rot alongside the soldiers who had been ordered to protect it. And the reason why was far darker than anyone could imagine. Forensic analysis left no doubt. The tunnel wasn't collapsed naturally, nor was it destroyed by Allied bombs, as some historians had thought. Blast patterns told a different story. Charges had been placed outside the tunnel entrance, not to destroy the train, but to lock it inside. Every detail showed planning, methodical, deliberate, no chance for escape. The train had been buried on purpose, and the soldiers were condemned to die with it. Investigators concluded that as Soviet forces advanced from the east, the SS made a ruthless decision. The cargo, experimental technology, looted gold, classified documents, was too valuable to risk falling into enemy hands. If they couldn't move it, they would hide it, even if hiding it meant sacrificing hundreds of men, a decision colder than the winter that claimed them. Newly declassified documents offered chilling confirmation. One was a coded telegram from late January 1945, referencing an emergency containment order issued by High Command. Another, signed by a senior SS logistics officer, instructed local commanders in Lower Silesia to neutralize and conceal all evidence of Reese-related transports before the enemy arrived. The timing matched the disappearance of Transport 472 perfectly. The orders were precise and deadly. There were more clues. A demolition crew's pay ledger, recovered from an abandoned SS barracks, listed unusual construction in the Eagle Mountains in early February, weeks after the train vanished. Survivor testimonies from forced laborers spoke of heavy underground explosions. Then, new orders came. Block all access tunnels with concrete and steel. Piece by piece, the picture became clear. Transport 472 had been rerouted into a hidden spur within Project Reese. Nothing was offloaded. The train, the soldiers, and the cargo were all sealed inside, a decision made in desperation and executed with ruthless precision. For the men trapped below, there was no warning, no last orders, just darkness and silence. For decades, that darkness kept its secrets until archaeologists finally peeled back the earth. The ghost train hadn't been lost. It had been murdered, and the world would finally see why. When news of Transport 472 broke, attention turned to the gold, weapons, and secrets buried beneath the Eagle Mountains. But for the families of the men who had boarded that train, it wasn't about treasure. It was about closure. Many were now great-grandchildren of the fallen, descendants of soldiers whose fates had been unanswered questions for nearly 80 years. They came from across Europe and beyond, carrying faded photographs, dog tags preserved like relics, and letters that had never been answered. They gathered at the excavation site under gray autumn skies. A temporary memorial stood at the tunnel's mouth. Some wept openly. Others pressed hands against the cold stone, silent, trying somehow to touch the past, to finally meet the men who had been gone for generations. Historians and forensic experts painstakingly reconstructed fragments of the lives aboard Transport 472. Letters tucked into uniform pockets spoke of hope, promises to return home, to marry sweethearts, to rebuild what the war had destroyed. Diaries revealed fear creeping in, confusion as the train neared its unknown fate. One soldier wrote of whispers between officers and a growing dread that Silesia might never be reached. Another left a final unfinished sentence. If anyone finds this, and then nothing, words frozen in time, cut off by fate itself. These were not fanatics or hardened ideologues. They were mostly young men, caught in a machine of cruelty they could neither control nor fully understand. The tragedy of Transport 472 was more than a missing train or stolen treasure. It was the erasure of nearly 400 lives, fathers, sons, brothers, sealed into the earth as if they had never existed, lives suspended in darkness for nearly 80 years. For their families, the discovery reopened old wounds, but also offered a chance to heal. Flowers could now be laid, names spoken aloud, gravestones carved where only questions had lingered. But the grief was not theirs alone. It belonged to all of us, a reminder of the human cost of fanaticism, of how far regimes will go to hide their sins, and how long history can conceal its dead, a haunting lesson written in iron, earth, and silence. Today, the unearthing of Transport 472 is seen as one of the most important archaeological discoveries of the 21st century. Not just for the treasures it contained, but for what it revealed about the final days of Nazi Germany. A frozen time capsule from January 1945. A snapshot of a regime in collapse, paranoid, ruthless, willing to sacrifice anything, even human lives, to protect its secrets. And at the heart of it, nearly 400 souls waited to tell their story. The recovered weapons components have revealed new insights into Germany's late-war technology. Crates of looted art and gold have reignited debates about restitution and the vast scale of German plunder. Letters and journals left beside the fallen soldiers have reshaped how we understand what it meant to serve a regime collapsing from within. Every artifact told a story frozen in time, yet even after cataloging, studying, and commemorating the site, questions remain. Were all the train's contents truly recovered, or had some been removed before it was sealed? Were there other transports, like 472, still hidden deeper in Project Reese's labyrinth? And what exactly was in the prototype crates marked Geheime Reichssache, weapons technology never seen before, or something even more ominous? Every answer seemed to uncover even darker mysteries. The Eagle Mountains, once a quiet stretch of forested hills, have become a living museum, a place where past and present intersect in chilling ways. Even today, ground-penetrating radar detects anomalies deep underground, hints that Transport 472 may not have been the only secret buried as the Reich fell. The mountains are still keeping their secrets. "The mountains still whisper," said one archaeologist, gazing at the excavation site. "And I think they're not done talking. The past isn't finished telling its story." The story of the ghost train isn't just about steel or treasure. It's about memory, memory of lives stolen, of truth buried, of history rewritten, then rediscovered. It is a testament to humanity's relentless search for answers, no matter how deeply they're hidden. And perhaps somewhere in the dark another train waits, silent, forgotten, holding the final untold chapters of a war that refuses to stay buried. This video was intense, but the next one, over there, is even more insane. Transport 472 is no longer just a ghost story. It is proof of the extremes a collapsing regime would go to protect its secrets. Proof of lives sacrificed, silenced, and nearly erased from history. Nearly 80 years of silence. Finally broken, the train and its cargo are gone no longer. Gold, weapons, journals, and the skeletal remains of soldiers now tell their story. A story of obsession, secrecy, and tragedy. A story of men trapped by fate and a world that nearly forgot them. And yet, the mountains still hold secrets. The tunnels may conceal more than we will ever know. Transport 472 is a window into the past, but also a warning. History doesn't disappear. It waits. It whispers. It demands to be remembered, and some secrets are never truly gone. The ghost train has been found, but its echoes will linger forever because some stories, once unearthed, refuse to stay buried.